Good evening, friends, fellow people interested in philosophy and metaphysical philosophy. So, my name is Russell Morahan, and I'm a dude who lives in London, in the United Kingdom, and I'm 40 years old, and I suppose for the last 25 years I've been a philosopher. Um, I'm not famous, like no one knows about me or anything. I don't particularly want to be famous either. Um, but I've spent a lot of time like thinking about philosophical and metaphysical and spiritual subjects, and happily I've recently discovered two fantastic YouTubers, uh, one called Mystiverse and the other called Exurbia, and I've had a great time watching and listening to their videos on YouTube, which are really awesome and really cool. And I've been listening. So recently, like tonight, I've been listening to the last couple of days. I've been listening to Mistyverse's like podcast episodes in conversation with, and like I think the first one's with Exurbia, and the fourth one's with Exurbia, and then there's like two in between with two other guys. I don't recall their names right now. And I just wanted to give my personal response to primarily to those podcasts. Um, now I hope this will go down well. It's certainly well intentioned. My comments are certainly well intentioned, and I'm certainly making these comments out of a desire to help and assist. You know, as a humble friend and as a humble contributor to the philosophical discussion. Um, but I do have a certain criticism. I do have a certain criticism of the conversations of Mistyverse and Exurbia, and the other people who've been on Mistyverse's podcast. Now, this is definitely not a criticism of these people as individuals. They're like lovely, clearly lovely people, and bless you, my friends. Like, we're clearly all, you know, we're all searching for the same thing, and we all have like, something in common in our desire to seek knowledge and understand the universe, and understand ourselves, right? So we're all in the same boat, and we're all striving towards the same thing. But I definitely do have a criticism of these videos, and it's kind of a core criticism. Um, okay, give me 2 secs. Mm, Now, actually, the criticism that I want to make of um, Mistyverse's and Mistyverse's podcast and Exurbia and their conversation, this criticism is actually not just limited to Mistyverse. It's actually a criticism that I have of general philosophical thought in the modern day. Um, and yeah, so there are like other philosophers, other modern philosophers, who I also think suffer from this same problem and same thing that I'm going to criticize. Uh, one of those is one of those people who I also think is guilty of the same mistake, philosophical mistake, is Lex Friedman, one who's also awesome, and also I have lots of respect for, and is a great philosopher. He's an American YouTuber who does videos on consciousness and metaphysics and stuff, and philosophy, right, and artificial intelligence. So that's his personal speciality. But also, there's another YouTube channel by a guy whose name I can't recall right now. Um, something like In Search of Truth, or let me see if I can find it really quickly. This might take me a second. I don't think I'm going to find it right now. Actually, I think Lex Friedman actually did an interview with this guy. Maybe I can find it. Maybe not. Okay, so let me get down to what I think. Let me get down to what my so I've beaten around the bush. Let me get down to what I think my criticism is. In all of these philosophical discussions that you guys are having, and you know, like the same problem is occurring, and the problem is that a great deal of what you're talking about is speculation. You're essentially the speakers are essentially spending a lot of time speculating around and about the ideas in this field of the study of consciousness, of the study of what is consciousness, what are the kind of, you know, what are the potentials of consciousness, you know. So there's an awful lot of speculation, like, oh well, this is really cool. And please forgive me, I'm going to do a bit of critique and a bit of paraphrasing, but like, oh, this is really cool, that's a great idea. Oh, what if this happened? What if this happened? What if that happened? What if this happened? And that's all very cool. Like, all of these questions are like important questions, and like they're not bad questions. But I think my criticism is that you're really talking around the subject rather than talking about the subject itself. You're kind of speculating and kind of discussing ideas that are like interesting, or that you're aware of, or people have hypothesized, without actually really making any kind of assertions or statements or decisions about what the actual nature of these things are, right? And I can understand why you're all doing this, why Mystiverse and Exurbia and Lex Friedman as well are kind of talking around these ideas and continuously asking questions without making any statements, right? And I understand why you're doing that. I think you're doing that because you're humble people who have an open mind, and you want to discuss these questions. Discuss these big questions without kind of without coming across as dogmatic, right? And I think it's also because it's out of humility, because I think maybe some of the issues are that really you gentlemen don't actually know the answers to these questions, right? Like, you don't know what the answers to these questions are, and so you're being humble and discussing them in an open-minded way, and that's really awesome. What I find a little bit silly about it is that there are actually answers to these questions. These big questions that you're debating and talking about, there are actually answers to these questions, and those questions have actually been written down in the philosophical treatises of various metaphysical philosophers throughout history. including the Tibetan Buddhists, and I suppose that the Kabbalists, right? Um, but the problem is that those those things that have been written down actually offer actual concrete conclusions or concrete decisions or statements about the nature of reality, about what the nature of reality actually is, as opposed to just conjecture or speculation, right? Now, it's a bit difficult to give an actual example of this, but I'm going to try and give an analogy instead. The study and understanding of consciousness and human consciousness is a complex and multifaceted subject. And there are many different points of view and different opinions about the nature of consciousness. Like, is consciousness an epiphenomenon of the brain? Is consciousness a spiritual thing that exists independently of the body? Yeah, we don't have any concrete proof of these answers yet, right? And I think that's I think that's where a lot of the speculation and a lot of where the kind of conjecture or the beating around the bush is coming from, is that we can't say, or at least the speakers themselves can't say for certain it's like this or it's like that, because they themselves, Mystiverse, Exurbia, Lex Friedman, don't actually know, right? Like, you guys don't. This is not a criticism. This is my sort of appraisal. Is you guys genuinely don't know the answers to these questions, right? And there's nothing wrong with not knowing, okay? And it's good to be humble, and it's good to be philosophical and discuss these questions openly without being dogmatic, right? The problem is that until we make certain, it's like until we make certain decisions, until we commit to a particular worldview, there are many questions which cannot be answered, because in order to answer those questions, you have to commit to a particular worldview, and that particular worldview has to be accurate, right? I'm going to give a really simple analogy with physics. For example, we all know that Newton's law, Newton's formula, F equals ma, force equals mass times acceleration, is true, right? There's no debate about that. Like, no one, no genuine intellectual or genuinely intelligent person is going to in any way dispute the authenticity and efficacy of the formula F equals ma, right? Force equals mass times acceleration. We just all know that is the truth. We know that is a fact. We know it's a fact. We see it every single day all around us. Force equals mass times acceleration. Okay. Now, obviously, we know that there are other laws in the universe that may supersede that, like general relativity, general and special relativity. Okay, it's a big subject, right? But we know that F equals ma is true, and we know that it works, and we know that it makes perfect sense. And we use that knowledge, that foundation of that simple formula, to build upon. We build upon that simple formula and build more and more complex physical laws and more complex scientific theories, until we ultimately get up to relativity and quantum mechanics, etc. Right? The problem that we have with the science or the study of the mind is that we're still lacking these most basic. It's like we're almost still lacking these most basic foundations. It's like there's no consensus agreement about what the most basic and fundamental foundations and functions of mind are. They they still exist in this kind of nebulous philosophical realm of conjecture, of like, well, this is what I think it is. Well, I think it's this. Well, what about this? Well, I think this is true. But what if this is true? Okay, that's all great, right? This is my idea, this is your idea. Great, okay? But if we're actually, as philosophers, as living beings, going to actually build a serious and effective theory and system of understanding the mind, you know, in the same way that we have a serious and effective system of understanding the physical universe, i.e. science, if we are to build an effective and serious philosophy, or, you know, metaphysical philosophy of the mind, metaphysical science of the mind, at some point or another, we're going to have to start making some kind of, we're going to have to stop asking questions, and we're going to have to start making statements about what is true and what is not, right? We're going to have to start building some kind of structure and some kind of framework of understanding the human mind, right? Now, you know, please take this this critique as you know, as a hopefully as a helpful contribution. Like, I'm not in any way, like, I love your guys' videos. Your guys' videos are great, right? And I love Lex Friedman. He's awesome. He's a lovely man. And you guys, Mystiverse and Exurbia, you're like lovely, great guys, and I love listening to your videos. Okay, but like, I do notice that there is an awful lot of conjecture. There's an awful lot of speculation. Like, what if this could happen? What will happen in 100 years if we have this? And that's great, right? It's fun to think about those ideas. I think about those ideas too. But if we're trying to work towards a consistent and authentic theory of mind, at some point or another, we're going to have to start laying down some laws. We're going to have to start laying down some rules. And we're going to have to stop asking questions and start making statements. Okay? Now the thing is that like, I'm certainly not the first person to realize this. Okay? And actually what I'm saying is actually not something in any way new, right? Just give me a second. I'm just gonna, sorry, I like to drink wine and smoke cigarettes. Forgive me. Sorry. Now, actually, this isn't actually something that's new. If you actually, and of course, you know, I'm sure you guys have done this, but like, if you actually investigate the history of philosophical and metaphysical thought throughout the last, you know, 4,000 years on planet Earth, you will actually find that there are some people and some groups of people who have definitely built specific systems which explain, which they believed, and, you know, I to some degree agree with them, laid down some rules and laid down a kind of systematic framework of understanding the human mind and understanding human consciousness, right? The most notable, you know, the most notable examples of which are Vedantic philosophy from India, you know, the sort of the foundation of Hinduism, and the Kabbalah in the West, the Kabbalistic philosophy of the Tree of Life, which is not, you know, which is not like a load of mumbo jumbo. It's actually a philosophical system to explain and systematize and understand the human mind, to understand consciousness. I would say exactly the same thing about the Vedanta as well, and also to a great degree, you know, Tibetan Tibetan Buddhism definitely has like an advanced system of understanding human consciousness and understanding the changes and permutations of human consciousness, right? So these cultures, Tibetan Buddhism, Hindu Vedanta, um, Western Kabbalism, Hebrew Kabbalism, Hebrew Kabbalah, these bodies of knowledge contain within them systems to understand the human mind, and they're not speculative. They are definitive. They make certain statements and certain judgments about the nature of consciousness and about the nature of human mind. You can certainly say that they are prescriptive in the sense that they lay down a set of rules, and those set of rules lead somewhere. Whether or not those rules are true, I suppose, is up to the individual to make out for themselves. But in my experience, they are. Yeah. So what am I saying? So the problem is that I think the problem is that, and I think this is the problem that I see here. And once again, when I say problem, I just mean dilemma or philosophical conundrum. With the discussions of Mystiverse and Exurbia and Lex Friedman, is that you're asking questions around the subject. You're speculating around the subject, but you're not committing to any particular system of thought. It's like listening to people. No offense, bless you, my friends. It's like listening to people who've not yet made up their mind about what's true, right? Like, you're still searching for your answers. You haven't yet found the answers, right? Now, maybe you believe the reason you haven't found the answers is because the answers don't exist, right? I personally, Russell Morahan, I don't personally believe that. I believe the answers do exist, and I believe the answers are actually already there, right? And those answers have already actually been written down, right, by the Kabbalists, by the Hindu Vedanta, by the Buddhists, right? But I think it takes a certain takes a certain conviction, and it takes certain like a certain. It's just a decision, isn't it? It's like, well, I believe this. Like, this makes sense to me. This works. The system is good, right? Okay. So I think the great problem that we face as philosophers of mind in the 21st century is the hard problem of consciousness, right? How does a physical body, how does a pile of organic chemicals and how does a pile of organic matter, complex and beautifully arranged as it is, give rise to this peculiar phenomenon called consciousness? The hard problem. And honestly, I'll be totally honest, in all of my searching and all of my investigations, I have not yet. I will completely admit that I'm also in the dark on this subject. Right. The best and only answer I have found so far in all of my searching over many years, and this is literally the cutting edge of my understanding of the hard problem, is an essay written by the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who was one of the astronauts who worked on the moon, who walked on the moon, and he wrote an essay called Quantum Holography, a basis for the interface between mind and matter. So it was an essay that he wrote in which he discusses the hard problem and some of his proposed solutions to the hard problem about how consciousness interacts with matter. Yeah, I mean that's the best I've got. Right. Thank you, Edgar. Thank you, lovely Edgar Mitchell. He's a great man. Yeah, I mean, the hard problem. So the thing is until we solve the hard problem, which we definitely haven't solved because we don't know how matter gives rise to consciousness, and we don't really know if consciousness is we don't even know if consciousness is really a byproduct of matter. You know, consciousness could be an independent sort of field or form of stuff that isn't dependent on matter, or it could be that consciousness is an epiphenomenon of the material universe, i.e. when you get, you know, enough like neurons and enough like computational power together, you know, it gives rise to consciousness, right? So on the one hand that's the materialistic view, and on the other you have the kind of spiritualist view, which is that consciousness is a like force or a field that exists independently of matter, right? So that's the big question. That's the hard problem. You know, does consciousness come from matter, or is consciousness something that exists independently of matter, right? That's the hard problem. Give me 30 seconds. The hard problem of consciousness is this great hurdle in our ability to form strategic and systematic theories about the nature of mind. As long as we are in a state of indecision or a state of ignorance about the answer to the hard problem, does consciousness come from the body, or is consciousness something that exists independently of the body, and we don't know the answer to those two, we don't know the answer to that question, we cannot continue, or we can, but our ability to continue to make decisions and make statements and build systems about the nature of mind is very severely limited, right? And that's totally fair enough, because it's a state of uncertainty. We just don't know the answer. However, long before the advent of modern science, you know, which is only a couple of hundred years old, philosophers and religious people and spiritualists have been thinking about this question for thousands of years, and for many thousands of years they didn't even know what the hard problem was. They didn't even think about the hard problem. And that didn't stop them from building advanced and systematic systems, right? Building advanced systems of understanding human consciousness, such as the Kabbalistic tree of life, and, you know, the Hindu Vedanta and Tibetan Buddhism. So even though these people, you know, these ancient peoples didn't understand the hard problem of consciousness, they were able to make a decisive decision to believe in the existence of consciousness, to affirm the existence of consciousness, and build systems to understand consciousness, right? They weren't beating around the bush, right? You know, when Buddha developed the eightfold path and the Four Noble Truths, he wasn't sitting there speculating and conjecturing about whether or not, you know, consciousness is an epiphenomenon of matter, or whether or not consciousness is something that exists independently. I think that, you know, if you had a time machine, you could go back and ask Buddha, I think he would just say, well, look, yeah, look, consciousness exists independently of the body. That's my opinion. But he didn't care about that. He didn't need the answer to that question in order to form systems, i.e., the entire foundation of Buddhism as a religion. He didn't need those. He didn't need to answer that hard question in order to build his entire philosophy about how we should live and what we should do, and what are the fundamental properties of consciousness. So the point I'm making is that at some point or another, as a philosopher, as a philosopher, if we are to build a system of understanding the mind, we have to stop speculating and beating around the bush, and we have to start making decisions about what mind is and about the way mind works, right? Because that's the only way that we can proceed to formulate a theory of mind, right? And I think that's what I feel is really lacking from Mystiverse's and Exurbia's and Lex Friedman's videos, discussions. They're still wonderful discussions, right? Bless you, my friends, right? But it's like, it's like you're tiptoeing around the subject without actually biting into the core of the subject, and trying to kind of go, okay, look, it's actually like this, right? I believe it's like this, and I'm going to build a system based on that belief, right? Or based on that conclusion, right? And it's only through making that decision that you can start to build, that you can start to advance, right? But the thing is that belief, that system, does have to be based on fact, right? It has to be based on factual experience. So you can't just go, well, actually, this is what I want to believe, and let's just build a system on that. Yeah, it has to be based on verifiable experience and fact, right? Which I suppose is difficult. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So look, I may as well be honest, and you can think what you want about me, and that's completely fine. I'm a Kabbalist, right? A follower of the Hebrew Kabbalah, and I know that's probably going to scare everyone. He's into occultism, but in occultism, in the Hebrew Kabbalah, there is this sort of these principles that it's sort of expressed that if you're going to embark upon this journey of knowledge and discovery, you have to embody these principles, right? And I'm specifically thinking of the 4 pillars of Solomon's temple, which are to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent, right? And I think my criticism, or the point I'm trying to make, is that if you're going to embark upon this journey of knowledge, you have to employ these 4 principles: to know, to will, to dare, and to keep silent. Keeping silent is about meditation, right? The ability to maintain a silence of mind. But what I'm pointing to here is the ability to know something to be true, right? Now, of course, Socrates says, all I know is that I know nothing. Lovely Socrates, right? And wisest is he who knows what he does not know. But if we are to proceed philosophically, we must at some point decide on what we know, or what is our best guess. We know that we can't know it absolutely, but this is our best guess. This is our working hypothesis. This is the hypothesis that, this is where I put my flag. This is where I make my stand. This is the ideology I'm going to go with, right? And at least try to build something from that. I know this. I know this to be true. I'm daring enough to adventure down this field of knowledge. Because unfortunately, my friends, my dear friends, is that if we spend all of our time speculating and going, well, this might be true, and that might be true, or what if this happens, and what if that happens, we will just spend an eternity wondering and guessing and not really going anywhere, right? I think what we need in the 21st century is we need people who are willing to say, look, I know this to be true. This is true. This is right. This is right. This is wrong. Right? And from that knowledge, we can build a new philosophy of mind. Alright? Sometimes it's important to have conviction in the things that you know to be true. Bless you, my friends. Peace and love. If you can hear that, that's my cat. Bless you. Have a nice night. Peace and love.